So good morning, I'm Chris Judd, Director of Venture at Chilworth, and from myself and my colleagues, a very warm welcome to you all this morning. I'm delighted to say this is our first proper live event since lockdown. It's been a long time coming, so it's really nice to see some familiar faces as well as some new ones. Our topic today is the career journey each of our panellists have made from CFO to CEO roles. The plan for this morning is for the panellists to briefly introduce themselves, and then my colleague David Hodges is going to be facilitating a Q&A. Rod and Richard are going to wrap things up, and we promise to have you away on the road by 9:30. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, our panellists, Will Crumbie, CEO of FatFace.
Brilliant. Good morning, everybody. So it's such a pleasure to be here. It's so good to be back in person, isn't it, doing all these events. And a bit about me. I mean, I think I've got one of the best jobs in the world. And yeah, one of the things certainly in my world, and we'll talk about it later on, is having passion for brands you work for. And you know, when I got the phone call about FatFace 9 years ago, I could have gone to Amazon, and I probably would have made some more money going to Amazon, but the love of the brand was absolutely what drew me in. A little bit about me, how I kind of grew up in the finance world. I qualified at Deloitte. I did an Anderson scholarship scheme before that. I wanted to get out into the commercial world rather than kind of go more traditional routes for a chartered accountant coming out of practice. Went to P&O, which once upon a time was a good thing to say, not necessarily this year. Spent 18 months there, had to move on, went to Alliance Boots, which is now Walgreens Boots Alliance, and had 7.5 brilliant years there, working in a variety of roles across the globe. And really, I almost talk about that as my growing up role. But as with always, you know, you have a choice at that point, and FatFace came in, and I was planning on becoming a group financial controller of FTSE 250 back in 2014, and then kind of trying to get through the ceiling that way. And IPO abort in 2014, market conditions weren't quite right. Put my hand up, took a bit of a while to convince them I was the right man for the job, and eventually got the FD role, which turned into a CFO role, looking after a lot of other areas of the business. That then I put my hand up again about a year ago, and I became CEO of this wonderful business. And you know, we're very lucky. You know, we've got a business that's recovered beautifully from the pandemic. Results will be coming out in November, but we're back to where we were pre-pandemic, which is super important, and growing in what is a super tough environment out there. So yeah, that's me.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheila Wye. I started my career locally to here, doing my training, firstly at Flightley Fueling, and then at Holmwood House Brewery, who I'm sure most of you know. I then moved on to All Days, just around the corner here, in a period of exponential growth, which was when I first knew Richard, a long, long time ago. And that was a good grounding. It was very commercial. I did my first role outside finance at quite an early stage of my career, growing the business through franchising. Then stepped back into finance, and then spent the next 20 years as FD of large retailers. So the Gold Group, better known for Ann Summers, Fenright Manson and Cath Kidston. The Gold Group really gave me experience of transactions and selling businesses, and very much involved in the strategy. And obviously as FD, you're very involved in the strategy. Similarly at Fenright Manson, I was almost sort of CEO, COO, then joined Cath Kidston to grow internationally, which is something that I hadn't actually done previously, but that's really set me up for the role that I currently do. I was approached to be CFO for Vaughan Designs in Winchester, very high-end lighting. I took that role if there was a possibility of it becoming CEO, because it was a much smaller company than I'd actually done previously. But I would say all of the experience that I gained in the larger businesses has allowed the business to grow. Similar to Will, we've increased our turnover from 15 million to 20 million since I've been CEO, and increased our EBITDA from 1 million to 4 million. So we quadrupled our EBITDA with COVID in the middle of it. And as Will said, really, really tough. Probably the toughest point as CEO in your entire career was COVID. But the business has come out the other side flourishing.
Cool. Hi, I'm Mark Baskerville. I'm CEO of Highwood Group. You may not have heard of us, but we're a property developer and construction business based in Romsey. And we develop and build in the living space, so care homes, retirement villages, retirement accommodation, and general housing, privately owned. So a bit of my journey, I started off at KPMG, did my audit for 3 years and left 3 years one day. Jumped into corporate finance for a couple of years, and then we hit good old global financial downturn. So decided to leave corporate finance, was no deals going on, and jumped into a financial controller role at a business doing property maintenance, which is really hard, low margin, and quite difficult and very grubby. It was also private equity backed, and they were on a buy and build consolidation in the midst of a global financial crisis. So that was quite a tough role, in fact, really tough role. And I sort of learnt a lot about real business there, coming from KPMG, about how you have to scrap and scrape in the sort of pits. That business, unfortunately, ultimately failed, which was an incredibly stressful time. But went through 2.5 years of lots of learning there, and you learn from your failures. Then jumped into a proper business, McCarthy Stone. I see some colleagues are here from McCarthy Stone. Had a great time at McCarthy Stone, 5.5 years there, building retirement accommodation around the country in the central FP&A team to start with, and helped with their sort of their private equity buyout and then the listing on the stock market. And I see they've now jumped off the stock market, and then into one of their regions as a regional FD to help sort of on the coal face, as it were, of property development. And then the opportunity came up at Highwood, which is 5 miles from my home, very close to my schools, my kids' school, and it seemed a perfect place, privately owned, lovely shareholders. So jumped from the big corporate down to a privately owned business as CFO. That was 4.5 years ago now. Had a great time, and sort of came to that funny time, what was it, 1.5 years ago now, where the founder shareholders sort of said, actually, we want to take a step back and walk out. Do you fancy being CEO? So he sort of wasn't planned particularly, but jumped into it last July. And you know what, I'm having an absolute ball, absolutely loving it. It's challenging every day, different challenges, very different challenges from the CFO, but loving it. And that's me.
Morning everyone, I'm David French. I'm Chief Exec at University Hospital Southampton, which is the Southampton General Hospital just down the road. So I spent most of my career in the pharmaceutical industry. When I graduated, I joined ICI. For those of similar age, might have heard of that company. They had a heavy chemicals business all the way through to pharmaceuticals. I started in chemicals and then moved into pharma. That was interesting because you go from 20 quid a tonne to 20 million quid a gram type scenario. So that was an interesting move. So I spent 20 years in pharmaceuticals, mostly with Eli Lilly and Company. The Prozac you'll have heard of, first makers of insulin, heavily into antibiotics now, quite strong in the antipsychotic sector of the market. So huge company, did stuff right, and I did a variety of finance roles, controllership of the UK business. Went into a sales role. If you ever get a chance to do a sales role, do it, because you're then credible as a finance person with the sales director. And then I went overseas. So I spent a couple of years in Poland, lived in Warsaw, Poland. Some crazy conversations with the Ministry of Health there, asking me after coffee, type stuff. And then I sort of ran out of road with Lilly and thought, what am I going to do next? And my plan was to join the NHS for 2 years, go work for the customer, and then come back to the industry with the credibility about knowing how they think, how they make decisions, how they buy pharmaceuticals. And that was 2010. So there is something crazily addictive about the NHS that draws you in. So my original role in the NHS was at Basingstoke Hospital as CFO. And it was the time when we had, well, we still do to an extent, foundation trusts which have more autonomy and empowerment to do things locally, and NHS trusts which were under the more regulatory guidance. And I was part of the team that brought together Winchester and Basingstoke hospitals, so all of the commercials and the legals, and that formed Hampshire Hospitals. And you do get, when you drive past, when it says Hampshire Hospitals, you kind of go, I did that. And then there is a sort of hierarchy in the NHS, and there is something about university teaching hospitals, and we're really fortunate in this city to have a university teaching hospital. So we're simultaneously a district general hospital for the city and the area, but we're also a tertiary referral centre. So if you need brain surgery, if you are driving along the M3 north of Basingstoke and end up in a big pile-up, you will drive past Basingstoke Hospital, past Winchester Hospital, and come to my hospital. And that's because we've got, one, the scale, but we've also got the team of specialists there 24/7, and it's a wonderful place. Will, I think you said you need to love your brand. I think to be successful in the NHS, you need to love your hospital, and I surely do love our fantastic hospital. So the scale of the organisation is surprising to some. We're about 14,000 employees, so the payroll is 700 million. It's a lot of money every month, and I love it. It's challenging. I became CFO in 2016, and then completely unexpectedly, the CEO left, and I became interim. And it was not in the plan, it was just it happened. And I got the taste for it. And then 2 years later on, the next CEO had moved, and I thought, I'm going to have a go at this. And I'm so glad I did.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Sheila. And David for those introductions. Morning, everyone. Just to reiterate what Chris was saying, delighted that we're back doing these business breakfast events after what's felt like an age since the last 3 years. So, yeah, thank you all for coming. Today I have some pre-prepared questions that I'm going to run through with our panellists. I'm going to ask a couple of you each to answer. After that, I'll open up to the floor for some questions from you guys. So, without further ado, Will, I'm looking at you for the first question. Was being a CEO part of your career plan?
Absolutely not. I think it's already been referenced. I think it's one of those things. One of my peers said to me probably 15 years ago, he said, the only person that's in charge of your career is you. And I think sometimes a lot of people think that they will have their career handed to them. And we all know that's not the case. You know, you've got to work bloody hard for it, and you've got to move on, and you've got to understand what your next role is. But when the opportunity comes up, you've got to take it, and you've got to put yourself in that game. And you know, when our finance director role came up at FatFace, you know, I heard at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 12 o'clock I'd apply for the role. When the CEO role came up, I found out probably 3 months previous to that, but as soon as I could make the utterance to the chairman, I made the utterance to the chairman. And I think not being too planned in your career is quite important, because you never know what curves or what that next phone call is going to be about, to be fair. And I think that's the super exciting thing of what we're all about and the career that we're in. So
the question, Sheila.
I think I've always been ambitious. I was an FD at 30. I left All Days and was, anybody would know, it was bought by the co-op. I had the opportunity to relocate to Manchester and didn't, but I was absolutely determined that just because I was being made redundant, I was going to be FD. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't the right thing. I was maybe a little bit young, because you suddenly realise that it's quite lonely at the top, and I think these days mentoring is much more of a thing. It wasn't back then. My time at Cath Kidston, I worked with Neil Harrington, who was the ex-CFO from Mothercare, who said for the whole time he worked there, if I wasn't there, he would have only lasted 6 months, because I did all the work and he was the CFO. But that, I think that was working with fantastic people and inspirational people, give you your grounding, and I was absolutely determined when I left Cath Kidston that yes, it was CEO I wanted to be. I'd done everything I'd wanted to do in finance and had done so many things outside of finance that naturally led me to be CEO.
Next question to Mark. What were the challenges you faced transitioning from being a CFO to CEO?
Oh gosh, I'm still going through that. I suppose so I only became CEO July last year, so it's a bit over a year. And I only actually recruited my replacement finance director 2 weeks ago. So I've been doing both roles badly for about a year and a bit. But I think it was a mindset thing, actually. It was a mindset of not having sort of deadlines and a routine that you have to deliver to, and more of a, actually I need to take some time out, I need to go and do some thinking. And bizarrely, so one of the things I did fairly early on was I joined a CEO group, it's called Vistage, and where you get together with like-minded CEOs of other businesses regionally. And you just take time out every month and you have an executive coach and you talk about things. And so I think the challenge for me was definitely a mental one, really, and getting away and actually not feeling guilty for disappearing, you know, in the afternoon, going for a swim and just thinking about what you want to do with the business. Because I think when you do those sort of things, I've always felt a bit guilty, you know, in my finance roles, or must do this, must do that, or do I sit on my computer and do that? Actually, in a CEO role, it's much more strategic, it's much more about thinking, it's much more about direction. So I found that a challenge. And then the other big challenge is the people. You know, I spend 40% of my time on people-type issues, making sure, you know, they're incentivized, motivated, working in the right direction, putting the right plans in, and just never really touch that side. And I do spend a lot of my time on people, but I love it. You know, it's great fun actually doing the people side of things because it's interactive and challenging.
Same questions to David.
There's something about, I think when you're CFO, I always felt of myself as the number two. And you can give advice and you can sort of coach your boss and you get to a decision, but ultimately it's their decision. And then suddenly you realize that you're the number one. So you can be in a room more and more where you're talking about things that are outside your comfort zone, and then everyone looks to you when everyone is given views and there are opposing views. And the difference is when I was CFO, I was on home ground because I can debit and credit. You know, you don't lose that, do you? You've got an instinct, and then you find yourself in a conversation where you're not on home ground, and actually the folk in the room often know better than you because they're the experts on that. So it's how you find a way. A decision has to be made. So trying to find a way through that safely, I found quite challenging. And similar to what you said, there is we can't be detailed people, can't we? I've done roles where you know, you need to be detailed. I've done VAT returns. The revenue doesn't want roughly right. It has to be right. So you have to be on the detail. And then when you realise as CFO is that you have to trust your people more and more and more. And again, when you're a CFO, you know roughly how a VAT return, what it should look, roughly what the bottom line should say. The CEO, you lose that, roughly what should it look like, because you're in completely new territory. So you lose your gut instinct on a lot of things because you're seeing things for the first time. But then you learn, don't you? And you get to understand what roughly it should be like, in your gut you rely on more and more and more. So I think in summary, you go from knowing the detail, needing the detail, to knowing your people and trusting the processes and knowing that they will get to the right answer, rather than knowing it yourself.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. I should add, if there's anything you want to you guys want to add, feel free. Will, how has working in finance shaped your approach to CEO?
Yeah, I think we've got a great basis to work from, haven't we? Our industry, our discipline, our hard work that goes in being a finance professional, I think sets you in really good stead. And I think that one of the most important bits is the finance team can always delve into all different parts of the business, can't they? They've got that right, quite rightly so, whereas, you know, other disciplines don't necessarily have that ability. And I think that's super important. And I think getting that experience sets you up so well. You know, I know certainly back in my Boots, I was in the logistics in the pharmaceutical wholesale side, and you know, all of those inquisitive questions that I asked over those 2 years, I could have taken it easy and just run the numbers and do what I needed to do, but that actually set me up really well to run the supply chain in FatFace, for instance, because I understood it and I got it. And I think having that ability and that finance discipline, you know, anyone who's coming through the ranks now, my one piece of advice would be just absorb as much as you can, because what you put in now, you'll get out later on for sure.
Same question to you, Sheila.
I think some of it is, we all talk about KPIs and we produce KPIs as finance directors, and I think the difference when you're CEO, the finance person will create the CEOs, the KPIs. As CEO, you absolutely relying on it. I look every single day at certain reports, and it's kind of like your early warning. And I think of it a bit like if you were flying an aeroplane, you know, the accountant is the one that does all the checks and balances and makes sure there's fuel in there and you know, everything's there ready for the aeroplane to fly. But actually, as CEO, if you're not looking at those warning indicators, it's reacting to them quickly. I would touch on something you said earlier on. I think if you're a finance person, it's absolutely key to have the best CFO you could possibly have, because you can't do both, and it's really, really hard, and everybody thinks you can do both, but you can't. Your job is CEO, and you need a really, really strong CFO, and you particularly need it if your background's finance, in my experience. But I know during COVID times, I did a fag packet envelope of, we'll run out of cash if we don't do something like next month, at the time of the furlough scheme. And 4 weeks later, the finance director had done all these myriad of different cash flows and this and thing, which actually confirmed exactly what I had on my fag packet. But I think if I hadn't had that, it would have been a lot harder to react in the speed that you had to, because I've never, 2009 was probably a similar instance when you had to actually react really, really quickly. But yeah, the numbers are key, but it's reacting to the numbers is the big difference.
Mark, Davies, anything you want to add?
I just think, you know, it's a great background really, because it's the one other discipline that really touches almost everything else in the business, I found. When you're in the finance role, you are kind of looking at, you know, you've got the remit to look at everything, haven't you? And then when you're CEO, you are looking at everything. So I think it's a really good background, and it's why it's a reasonably well-trodden path, isn't it? I think it's that in sales, isn't it, as far as I understand.
Brilliant. So David, did your leadership style change when you became a CEO?
I'd go back to what I said about the detail and giving people space to do their jobs, and I certainly did that. I became CEO in October 2020, so at that stage we were right in the middle of COVID, and it was just before the January 2021 peak. And finance at that stage was sort of less important, because the government was saying the NHS can have what it needs to do the job that it needs to do. I, during that time, decided to step back and let the doctors, nurses, do what they needed to do, and that was quite uncomfortable, sitting on your hands, because as a finance person, often you want to be right in there with your sleeves rolled right up, and that was difficult. But again, I think that was the right decision to make, because it allowed people. It was a vote of confidence in them, so it was a really positive message that they can get on and do. But I think as well, we got a better result because they are the experts. But certainly I found that quite difficult, away from home ground, making huge decisions about life and death that you didn't have responsibility for when you were CFO. There's something about as well, I think, about authenticity. So I think you are who you are. I am not a. You see pictures of Steve Jobs where he comes on the stage and goes, I love this company. Like, I don't do that. That's not. and there is a sort of people often expect you to be something that you're not. And I decided pretty early on, I'm going to be me, and the organisation knows who I am and respects who I am. And again, I'm glad that I've done that and not tried to pretend to be something different. Now, there is something. The more you practice getting on stage and going, oh, I love this, the more you do that stuff, the more comfortable it becomes. And I've surprised myself, really, that I can do that more and more. But it's authenticity. Be yourself.
Thanks. And same question to you.
Yeah, I think the authenticity point is absolutely spot on. I think you've got to remember why you've got to where you've got to, because there'll be lots of people wanting to give you advice, but you've got to come back to the core first of all and say, why have I got? But then you've got to move on and go, how do I adapt myself to get myself into the best possible position to lead the organisation? I think it comes back to some of the points we've already discussed. You know, it's more about people. I spend more time with our people now than I ever have done. And you know, Liz, our former CEO, would have had me. I was her enforcer. You know, I went and got stuff done. I got the difficult stuff done as the CFO. Whereas now, I can delegate that bit, but I can then drive the business forward with the vision that we have. And I think it's such a change, but you also just need to keep true to the person that you are, for sure. So the authenticity point is absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on.
Anything you'd like to add, Sheila, Mark?
Yeah, I'd agree. People is key, and I think it is very much communicating to all of the people in the organisation at an appropriate level. I spend a lot of time thinking about how do you motivate, because you are leading the whole organisation to deliver for you, and it is a team effort. Another example, during COVID, we did a keeping in touch. You know, we had half our workforce were furloughed. We had half of them turning up every single day into the factory, worried about getting COVID. They were in the factory, if the factory hadn't kept going, you know, the business wouldn't be where it is today. And getting that message right on that, I spent a week getting the tone right, so that when it went out to everyone, it motivated the people that were still at work, the people that were on furlough at home, and the people that didn't, if they were on furlough at home, they didn't really know whether they had a job to come back to. So communicating and people is the massive change that you have becoming CEO.
You know, I completely resonate with what David just said. I initially thought, oh gosh, I've got to do this rah-rah stuff, but then you realise over time, or hopefully very shortly, actually you don't. You just be authentic to yourself, and you know, you had a bit of imposter syndrome as soon as you get promoted. Like, oh God, I can't really do this. I've got to be Steve Jobs. But if you are authentic, that comes across so much better, and it comes across real, and then you get people buying into you. So I completely agree with David.
Next question. What are the most important things you have learned as a CEO? I'm going to go to David again.
Sheila? I think you have to react quickly. You have to. Sorry, that really wasn't intentional. And I think, yeah, it's thinking about motivating people in different ways, and yeah, I think I can say this. I'm the woman here. Liz Truss has demonstrated, yeah, what not to be as a leader in the last couple of weeks, and to me, she just an embarrassment to women in senior positions. She's done everything you shouldn't do. You know, you need to be decisive. You need to stick to your guns, but you need to have thought about what you're doing. And so. Yeah, she's a really good example, I'm sure, in time of how not to be a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to use Liz at this point as well. So no, it's definitely there. But it's absolute showcase of how not to take your people with you, isn't it? I mean, it's, you know, it just classic in terms of if she could have done that over 4 weeks, could she have got a much better traction with what she was trying to do, instead of trying to do it overnight and announce it the following day or 2 days or whatever else. So I think, you know, learning to take your people with you and understanding that takes time and energy to do so, I think the second one is about, for me, is about being in tune with the organisation. I think you've got to, my best conversations are with our store managers. So we've got 193 stores in the UK and 24 now in North America. And you know, the best conversations I have is what's really happening on the ground, and really understanding how the consumer's thinking and feeling, because we get lots of data and there's loads of data that's going on, but what really is the female customer in Colchester doing? You know, that's what you want to understand as a business. So I think being in tune is super important, and just keep having the energy to talk for the whole business and to talk to the whole business. Don't ever get scared. You know, coming from a finance background in a fashion retailer is quite hard. You know, the first time I went into a women's wear product sign off, I go, how do I add value here? How do I do it? You know, I'm not going to tell anyone how to make a dress. But I think you learn as you go along. You learn to ask the right questions, and I always find putting in that extra hour in the day, even when you're knackered on a Friday afternoon, is so important, because that person that you touch and you speak to will remember that and will give you will absolutely support you through your tenure. And you know, another example, last week, it's the last bit I've never done in our business, which was go on a photo shoot. You know, completely alien to a finance professional. You know, I see all these models on our website, and I'm in awe of them most of the time. And I was, you know, and you know, going on a photo shoot, but it was really good to understand how it works, what the mechanics are, what the pressures those guys are feeling. And actually, you know, I got texts afterwards going, the team are really buzzing and everything else. And I think it's just putting in that energy as a CEO to make sure you get the maximum out of your people and you understand what's going on.
You ready, David?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is being able to react quickly. It's all about the people. One thing that surprised me, it's not employee. We don't call it employee of the month. We call it something different. But the gist of it is it's employee of the month. And I make a point about going to visit the person afterwards in their role or workplace, and it astonishes me about how grateful and appreciative people are that the CEO has taken the time to do that. And I kind of go like, oh, Mr. French, no, it's David, and you sort of think. I'm just David. I'm an accountant who's now the CEO, but kind of that's it. But you've got to realise that as CEO, people look to you for those things, and that people look up. So people are watching what you're doing. They're watching what you're saying, how you deal with people. So there's something about you're on show all of the time. The other thing that I'd say is that don't forget. I remember I was in a difficult conversation with my chairman, who I get on with really very well. And I was talking about we are having trouble doing this, and he basically said, David, that's your problem, and it's all about the delivery. And that was it felt quite brutal for him to say that, but that is the stark truth of it. If your business doesn't succeed, it's you.
It's the same sort of things. It's understanding the impact you have on everyone was just quite revealing. Every little moment, just a conversation in the kitchen or out on site for us, and actually, you've got to bring your game face for that, and you know, you have to remember that.
I'll come to you for the next question, Mark. What are the critical challenges facing CEOs?
Oh gosh, being able to react quickly to critical challenges. I mean, that is facing CEOs. Reacting is important, right? Right now, for us, I think I mentioned before, it is the people thing. We've got a demographic time bomb issue, right? And so attracting, retaining, motivating staff is one of the things I worry about the most, I think, and ensuring we have the right people doing the right stuff and wanting to be with us. And that goes from everything, you know, from the brand you put out there to your values and how that gets embodied, to how you motivate and pay people and bonus and all that sort of stuff. But I spend a lot of time thinking about that. I've got this kind of simple concept, which may be wrong, that if you look after your people and you get them motivated, then they'll kind of look after you. and do all the right stuff for the business and you get them the right way. So I think for me that's the biggest thing. But apart from that, you know, the other thing I worry about the most is what on earth is going on with the macroeconomy, and how do you react to what's happened? You know, I've had pretty sleepless nights the last 3 weeks because we've had sort of funding challenges, you know, with pension funds. You know, they fund a lot of our projects. Hopefully we're going through that now, everything's been reversed, but it's been a really stressful 3-4 weeks. And so just having to deal with uncertainty of what's going on in the outside world is just really tough. So I think they're the two big challenges I face at the moment.
Same question, Sheila.
Yeah, I find again attracting people is the hardest thing. It's the most bizarre scenario that we've got all the most awful economic indicators. Yet if we're a growing business and I'm having to slow the growth down because we can't recruit enough people into our factory to actually be able to, I know exactly what we need to do to grow the business, but I've almost had to pause on everything marketing from a marketing perspective, because we grew 30% in the first 6 months of this year, so we're still growing very rapidly, but we could probably be growing at 100% if we could recruit. So retaining the people that we have got, I'm kind of hoping that the employment market, the one positive of what's going on at the moment, might mean that, you know, that it is a little bit easier to actually recruit. But that's probably the number one. And I think generally in the role, I think you can be in quite a lonely place. I think if you can try and get a really good chairman, I've been really fortunate that we've got a really supportive chairman. I run most things past him. He always says, you know, I hardly ever change anything you've made, but it is really useful to be able to talk through what you're thinking and just talk it through with someone else. I don't know if anybody else agrees. Yeah, I think having that good relationship with the chairman is the thing that sort of keeps you sane, because I couldn't talk to my husband about what was going through my head, but
Yeah, I think, you know, it's a really tough time in the world at the moment, isn't it? And I think I have a very simple mantra in the business, which is control the controllables. You can worry all you want about other things that are going on in the world, but we have a basic job to do in our business, which is design brilliant product that our customers will love. And what our customer tells us time and time again is if we design beautiful product, there's very little resistance to price, there's very little demand issue, and actually we'll keep growing the business. So it's about stripping it all back for me, and it's, you know, kind of at the mark, it's about motivating and then focusing people on that and taking some of that noise away, because you could worry yourself silly at the moment. I mean, you really could, and definitely, you know, I think we all have sleepless nights at the moment, don't we? But certainly for our people, we try and keep it as positive and as focused as we can, for sure.
Yeah, I think that I'm in the recruitment and retention business, because if I can recruit people and then retain them and retain the best people and create an environment where they can do their jobs, then the healthcare stuff will all look after itself. I don't need to worry about that. So on recruitment, we're in a war for talent, aren't we? You know, and in nursing, that's predominantly the NHS, but there is some private sector that we're in competition for. But a nurse can choose wherever they want to work in the country, wherever they want. So if your hospital is not competitive versus the next one, and I'm not talking about salary, I'm talking about the environment that they're working, the culture, some of the benefit stuff that we can do, then they will leave. And then industrial action, I don't know what everyone is facing in the businesses you work in, but the nurses are voting to go on strike, ancillary workers are voting to go on strike. So it's what can we do about that? I don't think the view in the public sector is that pay is not the answer, because when pay is increased, the private sector can trump. So it just leads to an inflationary spiral. So that leads you into what else is it that we can do around retaining our people and wanting them to stay in the market that doesn't revolve around pay. And that's quite an interesting certainly that wouldn't be a way of thinking that I'd have had in the pharmaceutical industry. You'd throw money at it. You had money to throw, and you would throw money at it. We don't. So it gets you quite innovative about what you can do to keep those people wanting to work for you because they have a choice.
Thank you. The next question to you. What qualities do you need to be a high impact leader?
I definitely think you have to have vision. I think you definitely need resilience. You know, the last few years have thrown everything at a leader. I actually think if you get beyond this and are managing in an upward cycle, it's actually quite a different role, because we export to Europe. On the back of COVID, we had Brexit, and we all said, well, Brexit would have been a nightmare if COVID hadn't happened. And now we've got this kind of thing going on. So I think that's really important. I think you need to be really strategic. You have to really think through your decisions and have looked all around the decision that you're making to make sure that you make the right decision. Be very clear at communication, and create. I think creativity. I think you mentioned going on the photo shoot. You know, the business is all about product. Well, both of our businesses definitely are, and you have to be able to. I am not a product designer, never will be a product designer, or photo shoot, but actually it is all of those images. It's the product. It's the product that the product is what generates the revenue. Is the people that make the company successful. So I think those are key.
Same question to Mark.
For me, I think the resilience piece is the most important thing, and it's, you know, we've been hit left, right, and centre the last 4 or 5 years. And it's resilience to keep going, but an ultimate belief in your core that you will succeed. You will eventually get there. I think it's really important, and holding that and building structures around you to ensure that you keep that and you don't kind of fall apart. And you exude that as well to everyone you interact with. I find that, if I'm honest, that's the number one thing for me, is just that ultimate belief that you'll get there, and pushing it out so that people believe that you believe that as well. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think a lot of brilliant things have been said. I think authenticity, come back to that word, is so key as a quality, and taking people with you. I also just think you need to think about your personality and you. You know, a lot of the coaching that you'll go through when you go into CEO will be around, you know, you do the whole personality traits and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, naturally a lot of us are quite introverted, and you might need to just move yourself slightly on the spectrum at some point, because our natural. So I think it's you know, it's having that flexibility and that resilience is super important, and just knowing your audience and having that quality and that EQ is if you can read the room, fingers crossed, it puts you in a great place.
In the middle of COVID, there were moments where we thought we'd watch Italy fall, literally, and there were moments where we could see the numbers going like that, and we were saying, what's another week like this and we're done. We were into battlefield type prioritization, who lives, who dies. And unfortunately, we didn't get to that space. But at that point, I realized that at some point, the organization needs something to hope for and to come out of. So I recognized that there would be a time when the organization's head will come up and say, right, where are we going? And I focused on that quite a lot. And for me, it was sort of blindingly obvious what the strategic future of our hospital should be. And I probably underestimated the impact that had on the rest of the organization, because to the rest of the organization, it wasn't blindingly obvious, and they wanted that direction. And then there's something around comms. So I can't get my organization together. I can't get them into a room. So you communicate all different ways. Emails, maybe half of them get read. you do videos, you do all of this. You can't speak to the whole organisation. So multiple ways of communicating, and it's all about thank you for all that you're doing. I recognise the hard work and the sacrifice, and that this is where we're going. And if you can be really clear and consistent on this is where you're going, you then rely on the rest of your people to deliver that. So then it's around what's the environment where your people can deliver it. And there's if you'll allow me like a minute, just a story. I was in the middle of the hospital. There was a guy pushing a trolley, a waste operative pushing one of those huge trolleys full of waste, and the wheel on it was squeaking so loud that you couldn't hear. If you were asleep as a patient in the whole hospital, you would be woken up. It was an extraordinarily horrible noise. And I said to him as he came up to me, God, we just need a bit of oil on that wheel, don't we? And what he said to me, and it said, I get goosebumps when I tell the story, but it informed what I did next. Because what he said was, I know, but they won't let me do it. I know, but they won't let me do it. So here was a really junior guy, knowing that what he was doing was wrong, wasn't about world-class people delivering world-class care, but there was something in our culture that stopped a simple thing, like a spray of WD-40 on that wheel to stop it squeaking. And he knew what needed to be done, but there was something stopping him. And it was that moment that informed how are we going to empower our really junior people, because they know what needs to be done, they know where the squeaking wheels are. We have got to create an environment where those squeaking wheels get fixed. I want the squeaking wheels found, and I want the people who know how to do it to be given the authority and the empowerment to be able to do it. And that was the origin of one of our improvement programs. So we talk about squeaking wheels quite a lot. You will have squeaking wheels in your job. I've got squeaking wheels in my job. Some of them are physical squeaking wheels, some of them are other stuff. But you can't, in your organisation, solve all of those things yourself. I mean, if you're a 5-person business, maybe you can. But in substantial businesses, it all relies on your people. And how top to bottom can you get your people working towards making improvements towards the goal that you're trying to achieve?
Last question.
Sorry, can I follow up on that? I just, one of the points I watched a program last night about Elon Musk. Some people may have watched it. And, sorry? Interesting character indeed, yeah. But the one thing that he does seem to do is inspire people towards a mission or a vision that gets them not just sort of in their head, but in their heart as to what they're doing. It's the whole Apollo moonshot thing as to why they're doing stuff. And he got people working, you know, I don't know what it was, 20 hours a day for a month or something, and absolutely exhausted to get this vision of what we wanted to do with Tesla. And so it's getting that right mission, that right vision, and then conveying it and believing it and living it. I think if you can do that, if you can get your company or your business or your organisation to have that one singular vision that really gets you in the heart, and then you push that out, I think you can make wonderful things.
Thanks. My last question for me. What new skills and experiences would you like to see in the boardroom? To Sheila.
I think one of the biggest things that's changing at the moment, and it's particularly important to young people, I think it's more important to everyone, is kind of sustainability. I never thought I'd say I think you need definitely have an input, and I think it's something that's, you know, as we look forward, businesses that aren't sustainable will find it quite hard to actually do business. We have a big hotel sector. It's harder and harder to win contracts unless we can demonstrate our sustainability. I just think we have a moral obligation to do that as well. So, and that's quite a big move on. I think that's probably of a normal board, whether it's actually a board position, but there definitely needs to be regular reporting of that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think sustainability, ESG agenda is so important, and it's evolving so quickly. You know, we've been carbon neutral for the last 2 years, but it's now about net zero, you know, and that agenda is pretty material in itself. And I think having that at the top table within most of the decisions is quite an important one. And I also just think it's about refreshing and continuing to grow that kind of digital journey on a board as well. I think, you know, in a multi-channel business like ours, you go to the safety of stores because it kind of, you can understand it a bit more because you can touch and feel it and go there and get on with it. But actually that digital world is going to be so important, is so important. You know, it's 40% of our business and will be 60% in the next 2-3 years. So it's about being digitally savvy, and I think that needs to grow on boards as well. That and ESG for me.
We're just conscious of time. I'd like to open up to the floor for any questions that we may have. So don't be shy. Yeah.
Hi there, thank you to the panellists. My question is to the panellists generally. On the basis that time is probably our most precious resource, is there anything that you've had to do differently going from CFO to CEO of your time management strategy and how you use your time?
Yes, I think so. Sorry, I'm trying to think how to respond to that. I sometimes feel I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sort of wandering around, putting out fires occasionally, and so you don't really think about time strategy. I certainly feel like I'm less organised, if I'm honest, but it's possibly because I've been doing 2 roles for a year, and so I'm hoping that now I've got a finance director and I can start being a bit more organised and perhaps have theme days. But yes, certainly when I was CFO, it was a lot more organised, a lot more regimental, and now I'm less organised and regimental. It's not really answering your question, is it? But I think it's all I can say really at the moment.
I mean, coming back to what I said earlier, it's all about the people. I'm in the recruitment and retention business, so I prioritise talking to people. So what gives as a result? So business cases, you know, multi-million-pound business cases, I previously would have been all over it and actually quite enjoyed doing that. So I have to then, you need a team around you that you can trust. Are the finances okay? And when they say yes, you trust them that they are okay, which gives you self-permission to go, it's okay. So it's letting go a lot of that detail that you enjoyed and was part of what being a CFO was all about. You would be all over those decisions. And I spend more and more of my time talking to people, and in particular the shop floor folk, to try and, because the hierarchy is so big, it's trying to make those connections between the top and the bottom that I prioritise.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's at 2 ends. One is actually you've got to get up from your desk. You have to wander around and talk to people. I'm absolutely sure that minimum of once a week I get around and try and talk to kind of everyone in the factory, because it's amazing what you learn that people haven't been telling you. It's very informative, but it's motivating them. And similarly, I think it is taking a bit of time out, and I do find that sometimes easier at home, where you're really trying to think about the future and not feeling guilty. It's something that when you're in the office, it's not that easy to think, right, where are we going in 12 months' time, and what are the really big things. And I think that was one advantage when we were working from home more regularly. It was very, very clear what you had to be doing, and it's very easy to get sucked into sort of minutiae when you get back to the office. So I think, yeah, not feeling afraid to take time out to really think about the future, because that needs to be at least once a month, if not once a week.
And the only thing to add from me, I think, is as a CFO, you're probably not on most people's top 3 list of who they want to speak to. And as a CFO, you're probably talking to them because something hasn't gone quite right, or it's more of a general update, or whatever else. Whereas as a CEO, everyone wants to spend time with you, and they want the hours of your time, and they want to understand it, and they want your vision and focus on it. And it's about how you're disciplined with that time, but you make people feel good at the same time. And that's such a delicate balance, such a delicate balance.
Hi, I'm Josie from RWD. I think all of you talked about resilience and being the authentic self, and also potentially being lonely at the top. Some might coin it brave in the wilderness. Can you give us some practical tips how you actually cope, how your coping mechanism of feeling like it's okay to brave the world, potentially not being lonely, but being alone?
I can see you all thinking.
We started before, we talked about the relationship with the chairman, because that's key. It can be a distant, almost more senior executive, or it can be a talk stuff through. And knowing that the chairman has got my back gives me confidence to be able to make risky decisions. And that takes a lot of pressure off, which makes my world a less pressured and lonely place. And this sounds a bit trite. I feel that if I can control what I can control, I can't control what I can't control, and I go home at night, and big jobs are 24/7 jobs, but I know that if I reach a point where if I'm waking up in the middle of the night that I'm doing too much, and I've got mechanisms to pull me back from that, and knowing where your tipping point is something that will be unique to everybody, that it will be a different point for everybody, but knowing where it is and knowing those danger signals and being able to pull back from it is a really critical skill. And earlier in my career, I missed those or ignored those signals, and that was a pretty tough time. So if you don't know where that point is in your own, then I'd encourage you to find it and then take notice if you go beyond it.
I think network's key. I think your network is absolutely the most important bit of this, so that you can have those relationships with other people in your sector that when you're having a bad moment, they're probably going through exactly the same thing at the same time. And WhatsApp's an amazing thing for that, isn't it? I think that's probably the number one thing for me. And in our world, you know, we've just announced we're going into Canada. And what's given us confidence is we know 2 or 3 other people have gone in who've done really, really well. And it just helps those decision-making processes, it just helps that informal soundings. I think that, along with I never thought I'd say this, but a brilliant coach as well. I didn't have a lot of time for coaching pre-pandemic, but now I have to say, having the right coach and having the right time with them, as well as a good chairman, puts you in such a better place. Because it is CFO can be a lonely world. There's no doubt about that in my mind, because you're often once removed from the board because you're in that kind of in-between phase. But CEO is tough. But if you get the right network, I think you can make it work.
Any further questions? Matt, yeah.
So thanks very much for all the insight you shared. Fascinating. I think a lot of what you shared actually could be brought into the finance world as well. These things are specifically to CEOs. What do you wish you had known back when you were in the finance world that you now know that could possibly help us in the finance world?
Sheila?
I need to be decisive now. I think maybe it's sort of managing upwards. Again, it's something that's very different as CEO, but I spend virtually you spend your time leading people, and that's what we've talked about here, but actually managing upwards is really important. And I guess that's my observation of some of the finance people, is sometimes when they present something, they're not actually necessarily, they've summarised the answer, but not necessarily thought, how will that land with a shareholder or a senior stakeholder? And I guess as a growth thing, it is the big transition that you do, and I actually found it really annoying initially and thought, oh, this is really annoying. But actually, those people own the businesses, whether you're a private equity-owned business, the city, mine's a family business. You have to tailor what you're doing to that audience, and you have to convince them that the business, in their words and in their language, is successful, and that's completely different depending on the ownership structure of who you're working for. Hopefully that answered your question, because I was trying to think on my feet.
Yeah, I think so. It's like the world doesn't rotate around finance. It's, you know, obviously really important, but actually condensing the financial insight that you bring to bring recommendations and bring it to nice bite-sized chunks and keep working on that. And, you know, if you just send a report with lots of numbers on it, you know, that's quite a lot of time to go and read it and understand it. You've got to really do the recommendation piece and the bite-sized chunk piece.
Can I add something? I wish I'd known that sometimes speed trumps accuracy, and that roughly right is sometimes good enough, not with a VAT return, but, you know, that roughly right is better than exactly wrong. And I think I'm saying what you're saying as well, that I used to think it was all about the money, and you now realise in every sector, I think there's like a holy trinity. So if you're making bicycles, you want cheap, light, and strong. And the three in my world are money, quality, so that's outcomes, patient experience, and then how are we doing against all the government targets. And I used to think it was all about the money. You realise actually it's about trying to keep all three in balance.
Any other questions? Someone, you first.
As a financially based CEO, you tend to be more conservative in your forecasts and the future for your companies.
Definitely, I'd say underperforming and over-delivering is a key bit, and I think probably one of the things that frustrates me more in the board now that never has done is not hitting deadlines and frustrating other board members who ultimately have control over whether you're staying in your job or not. So I think conservative management is absolutely there, but to a base, depending on where expectations are. But I'm certainly more pragmatic now, I'd say, in my forecasting and reviews, I think.
I agree 100%. I think if other members of my board were in charge of agreeing the forecasts, there'd probably be double what I end up putting down. So yeah, 100%. And I think that's really important.
So just to follow up on that, does that not create further problems in the organisation? The supply and demand and everything else that's happening within the organisation?
It's a balance, isn't it? That's kind of the role, is trying to manage that, being realistic but being challenging. I mean, setting forecasts has so many different implications. You've got kind of shareholders to deal with, a chairman to deal with, a management team you want to motivate and believe that you can hit certain numbers, then having a realistic position, looking at cash. Everything is a balance, and that's kind of key part of the role, I suppose, is trying to give something that's realistic with variations around that.
Two questions, if that's okay. First one, how did you deal with perception when you first transitioned, being seen as a lead? You talk about leadership quite a lot, how do you make sure you're seen as a leader rather than a finance person with a new job title? And the second one, again, you talk about influencing the business, but what about the board? How did your relationship change? What were the pitfalls? And with investors or owners as well? How did that change?
I think that the thrust of the first question is really easy. I was fortunate that when I stepped up from CFO to CEO, I was already part of the organisation, so the organisation knew me. I knew them and they knew me. I think it would have been really quite tricky to have moved from CFO in another business to CEO in a completely separate business, and I would caution, I can't caution you, I would caution myself, I think, about whether that was sensible to do it. I think as well, you do need to change gear. So although when I moved from CFO to CEO in the same organisation, I did think up front around, right, how am I going to be as CEO? And I'm not contradicting what I said earlier about authenticity, but you do need to be different, because in the room previously I was the person challenging on money, and you can't be doing that all the time as CEO. Or you can, but you'll be perceived in a certain way. So I think it's around thinking about how you want to position yourself with the organisation, and then following that through.
I think leadership shadow is really important here. So I'll give you my first year, 2 lots of 360 feedback, one at the start of the year, one at the end of the year. One at the start of the year was the business likes you, so that's great. You're doing the good job there, but actually your board members think you can be doing a little bit more as you take on the CEO role. So I focus on that. 12 months later, relationship with board great, business has deteriorated a little bit. So it comes back to, for me, leadership shadow, and it comes back to authenticity and balance is key. And I think influencing the board is, I always say, you know, they're the people who pay my wages at the end of the day. You've got to keep them in the best possible frame as possible. But you can't do that at the detriment of your business as well, and that's where it becomes a 24/7 activity for sure.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's all the questions for today. Dr. Peter, Ron, Richard, I'm ready to be CEO now. Thank you to the panelists, Will, Sheila, Mark, and David. Can I ask you to put your hands together?
Great to see so many old, familiar faces. And a few new ones. I can see young ones and new ones. For those of you that don't know us, my name is Richard Carter, and I'm Rod Hutchins. We're the joint founders of Chilworth Partnership and Venture Recruitment Partners.
Yes, as you can see, we've got a talented team driving the growth of our business forward. No squeaky wheels here, David. And however, we did think it appropriate this morning to just let you all know that the old boys are still around.
Thank you. We wanted to thank you guys personally for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules to really come and talk this morning. And this is our first event, as we said, in 3 years, face-to-face event, and it's nice to see such a good turnout. I was just thinking earlier that 30 years ago we had a similar event, Rob and I, which was called Dressing for Success.
I can't remember that.
And one of our panellists actually won the Best Dressed Accountant Award, who was Sheila. I like to think we marched through the luxury end of fashion retail. Down to us, I think, wasn't it? I know I speak for the room, so we all found this extremely useful, enjoyable. I know there are some people, sort of contemplating making a similar move, and I know that they would pick up tips, and I want to thank you for that. I think Rob wants just to say a couple of things up there.
Yeah, I spoke to quite a few people this morning, and they've asked how's the market, and I suppose my answer has always been a bit of a surprise tone in my voice. It's very good. We've still got a very good market. We had a great first 6 months of the year, and we started the second half of our year very, very well. So I'm pleased to say our business is in pretty good shape. As I said earlier, we've got a good team now driving the business forward. The growth is there. Our live clients this time last year we were 50% up, which is really encouraging. They've made the point about recruitment, retention, very, very important to us. So our latest new recruits, just like to say, give them a bit of a shout out. So we've got Nadia, who joined us just recently, and Chloe, who joined us just recently, and we've also got Karen Rich, who joined us as a member of our senior leadership team, who joined us a month ago, so that's great. One quick note as well, I just wanted to say a personal thank you to Jodie for getting this on the go, and a quick shout out for you, Dave, as doing a great job as our facilitator and question master today, but also just to let you guys know that Dave has now been with us for 10 years, which in our industry is pretty rare. So thank you, Dave.
Also, a quick thank you to the wonderful Science Park team, Emily at there, who's helped organise everything this morning. Thank you. As Chris said earlier, we'd have you away by 9:30, we will. They also said earlier that the clock has beaten us, and it has. Rest assured, we'll be in touch and hopefully get some meeting organised with you all. But in the meantime, we wish you a sort of safe onward journey. We look forward to seeing you all again very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.